Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is the top of the hour, so we're ready to just jump right in. My name is Jennifer Morse, and I am a product evangelist here at MadCap Software. And today we're going to cover everything that's new in the MadCap Central May 2018 release. So this new release adds a new lightweight editor for streamlined contribution and review with MadCap Flare. So subject matter experts, authors, and other non-Flare users can now easily collaborate, contribute, and review Flare content using an integrated cloud-based workflow. So a couple of housekeeping items before we jump right in. Remember, this webinar will be recorded. We have a few people funneling in here, so this is perfect. So if you have to jump out for whatever reason, not to worry. We will send you a link to the recording as soon as we're done. Also, there is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar console there, so feel free to use that to ask any questions as the webinar progresses. We'll do our best to get to those questions as they come in and also answer what we can at the end. And whatever we don't get to, we'll follow up with a question and answer document to everybody that registered. So hopefully you can all hear me okay. Hopefully you can all see my screen. If you can't, feel free to ask a question or make a comment there in the question panel. We'll do our best to assist. But hopefully from the technical side of things, you can hear and see me or see me virtually okay. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, before we go, I just want to kind of reiterate this new workflow that we have. One of the reasons why we built it, what we're going to show today, is that it really simplifies the entire review workflow, since all of the reviews for your Flare content can now be done in the cloud using MadCap Central. So if you have a MadCap Central subscription, this whole new workflow lets you add non-Flare users, in other words, subject matter experts, to your central license. And then you can collaborate with those subject matter experts as well as other authors by sending Flare topics and snippets for review right from the Flare UI. So if you don't yet have a subscription of Central, well, then you'll still be able to try all of this out for free with your license of Flare 2018. And I'll touch again on that at the end. But before we jump into the whole flow of content with this new workflow, I want to just quickly review what Central is for those who may not be familiar or if you haven't seen it in a little while. So what is MadCap Central? Well, MadCap Central is our cloud-based platform that we developed, and its goal is to really help you plan and help you track, manage processes, content, and the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. And why did we build this thing? Well, for years, Flare users have been letting us know about problems they've been running into with their documentation, workflow challenges, technological challenges, and so on. And we know that not all of these problems are things that Flare can actually solve on its own. So just as an example, let's talk about source control. Teams often need an easy-to-use version control solution that all of the writers can use. Even single authors can take advantage of source control. You don't necessarily have to be a team in order to make use of it. Maybe you need a better source control solution than what's already in place. And the thought of getting help from IT or getting those kinds of resources internally to get everything set up and configured can sometimes feel daunting. And this is an area where Central can help. With a couple of clicks, Flare authors have instant source control with MadCap Central, and they can easily collaborate. They can be self-reliant to set all that up on their own. Another one is task management. We've seen authors make use of all kinds of things to keep track of the things that they have to do to manage documentation. We did a lot of usability testing on this, and we looked over people's shoulders. We wanted to see how they work and how they plan, and we saw all kinds of things. We saw people keeping big, scary spreadsheets, sticky notes of to-dos over the whiteboard. Some people just kept all this amazing tribal knowledge lodged in their brains and so on. So Central offers this really easy to use task board and also project checklists to keep you on track and keep everything in sync in terms of all the things that you have to do. The next thing, browser-based review workflow. So the getting subject matter experts involved is another area that's been very challenging. We've offered Contributor as a way to fold in your subject matter experts into the review process, but we often heard it was challenging to get subject matter experts to install and use another piece of software. Let's be real. Subject matter experts will, they can come in lots of different skill sets. So while Contributor was designed as a scaled down processor, it was still different. So now we've done away with the need to install any kind of desktop tool. This new review workflow using Central means your subject matter experts, and even other Flare authors, which we'll show you, well, they can review content in a browser in this easy-to-use lightweight editor, which we'll see. And we keep the power and the security of Flare as a desktop tool for the authors, but now we pair it with this easy-to-use browser-based editor, and that's going to be the main focus of today's webinar. I'll touch quickly on build management. This is another area where Central can help, and it's a big challenge that we've heard is that sometimes users, want to have a programmatic build process in place. They don't want to purchase and configure additional servers or purchase additional build licenses of Flare to support this programmatic build process, and Central makes this really easy to do with a couple of clicks. Authors with the appropriate permissions in Central, you can do this all on your own. You don't have to get additional servers set up or purchase additional build licenses or get a batch file configured and get everything configured using the command line. It's really easy to do. And then of course the last thing I want to mention is hosting. If you're a Flare user, it's really easy to build your outputs. You click a button that says build and you've got your output file. But then what? You need to get your beautiful sites online. You need to get these amazing looking PDFs that you've developed out to your end users. And sometimes that process can be time consuming. You may not have internal resources to get a staging server and a web server set up quickly. So Central offers an easy and inexpensive way to stage and host content for your end users to view all of this content that you're authoring and publishing. So we're seeing that, single authors and also teams of authors, they often use different processes rather than being more integrated in their approach to document and content management. So our goal with Central is to offer a unified cloud platform with features that help lone authors and also teams of authors. And now with this review workflow, all of the folks supporting the authors to manage the technical documentation process as a secure managed service. So that's what Central is, and a little bit of background as to why we built it. So let's get into it and see how this whole thing works. I'm going to pull up Central because I'm already logged in. So here's how it works. So here I am in Central. Now I've got a Central license. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see. I've got my Central license. I'm already logged in. I can see my name up here on the upper right-hand side. I can see my license that I'm logged into. I've got a few users here in my Central license. I've also got a project, a Flare project that I've bound to this Central license. So I took a minute and did that before the webinar. It just takes a couple of clicks. But I want to have my project synced up here so that I can take advantage of all the fun things that Central has to offer, including this ability to review the Flare content in the cloud and using this lightweight editor. So a couple things you'll notice that are new if you've used Central. One thing is over here on the left, we have this new reviews page. And we're going to take a look at that in a little bit more detail. The other thing you'll notice is we have this new seat type here in our users page. So before this wasn't there, everybody was one type. But now we have the ability to invite other users that are subject matter experts. If you have the right permissions in Central, if you're one of these user admins in your Central license, and you'll see this, if you have your own license of Central, somebody's going to be the user admin, or more than one person will be. Or if you're testing Central, if you're the first person to sign up for your trial, you'll be the user admin and you can invite other users to your license. So when you do add other users, it's pretty straightforward. We click the plus button, and now here's where you're going to invite folks to your team. You'll put their first name in, their last name in, their email, and this is new. This is where you're going to choose what type of user they're going to be in Central. So we've got author, and authors have all access to all of the functional areas here in Central. All of these little pages here on the left will show up for you when you log in as an author. The second user seat type we've added is subject matter expert. So you can actually choose to bring people into this license who aren't maybe necessarily full-fledged Flare authors. They don't need access to all of these other functional areas over here. You just want them to be in here so that they can review and edit and collaborate on content that you're writing in Flare. So you put in their information, you'll hit send invitation. When you invite somebody, that person's going to receive an email with a link that says, click here to complete your login. And it's going to ask them to create a password, and they'll be able to log in, and they'll come to your license here, and you'll know that they're invited because, I took the status column off. You can add other columns in here if you want to see, but they'll have a status that says active. You'll be able to see if they're invited, and then as soon as they click that link in that email and they create their password so that they can log into your license here, it's going to say active. So now you can build out your team of users. Now, once your user's invited, as I have here, we've got our project synced in Central. Flare authors can send topics out to subject matter experts and also other Flare authors for the review. And all of the reviews, all the commenting is going to be done here in Central, and all of in the lightweight editor. So again, runs in a browser. So again, fun thing, nobody has to install anything. And we'll take a look at this. Now, in order for this whole process to start, I know this webinar is about Central, but we can't not talk about this without talking about Flare. The whole review process is going to start with the Flare author. So I'm going to switch over to Flare for a moment, and we're going to have a topic flow through the entire workflow so that you can see how it works. So we'll give it a go. So I'm going to pull up Flare for a moment. So here's Flare. Here's the project that I just bound to Central. So I logged into Central. Now, if you haven't done this yet, if you have a Central license or if you signed up for a trial of it, the way you're going to do that is after you sign up for your license and you have your username and password, you're going to want to log into Central from Flare. So you'll come to the View tab and you'll click this MadCap Central button, and you'll get this Central window pane will open. I've already got my project loaded here, but this will open and you'll be prompted to put in your username, which is just your email address, and that same password that you created when you configured your secure license and you were able to log into Central in a browser. So same username and password, email, and then that password you created. And then you'll have the opportunity to bind your project. It's a little wizard that you walk through. This is grayed out because I've already bound it, but this little plug here, once you click that button, you'll have a little wizard that will walk you through binding your local Flare project to the Central, to your Central license so that Central can see it, and then you can start taking advantage of it. So it's bound, and here we are in Flare, and I've got this topic that I want to start sending out for review, and I want to start getting some edits and have people collaborate on it. There's a few different ways to send files for review. Up here on the Review tab, if I want to send this out, one easy way is just click the Send for Review button. You could also send multiple files for review. Here I'm just sending one, but if you had your toggle show files option here and you had multiple files that you wanted to send, you could multi-select files and right-click and send for review if you want, or click the Send for Review button. But I'm just going to send this one here. So I'm going to click Send for Review, and we get the files, and this is the other place where we can add additional files. I can use this plus button here to add additional files in my project if I want to. There's also a little red X to remove files if you want. Now, one thing I want to point out, when you send a topic for review like this, if your topic has any associated snippets in there, because, you know, sometimes I think of topics like little Frankenstein pieces. Sometimes they're made up of lots of other things. They may be made up of other snippets that make up the entire topic. So if you happen to send a topic that's got snippets in there, by default, all of those associated snippet files are going to show up in this list. So you don't have to necessarily think about it. All of those are going to come along, you know, they travel with the topic for review. If you think that's going to be too much for your subject matter experts, if you think that's going to be too confusing and you just want them to focus on the topic content, you can select any of those snippets and remove them here by using this X button. The nice thing too is if you choose to remove those snippets, when your subject matter expert or the other Flare author, when they look at them in the editor, the content won't be missing. The snippet will still show up in the topic. So from a context standpoint, they can still see what that is, but it just won't be an editable file for them. So that's your call, your choice. If you think that's going to be too much, you know, you can send the snippets in a different review if you want, but if you don't want them to edit those snippets, but you just want them to be able to see the content in context, well, if you remove them, they'll still show up and render in the editor for them. And they can always add a comment around there, and we'll take a look at that. So next, I'm going to click Next. That's the topic I want to send. Oh, I also want to point out, here we've got two new radio options here in the Send for Review. Before, we didn't have this Send to MadCap Central option. We only had Send a Review package. This is what you would use if you were sending a file for review using Contributor, which is a desktop tool. But we're focusing on this new browser-based way, so we're going to send it to MadCap Central. So I'm going to click Next. And this is what we'll see. We'll be presented with a list of reviewers. This is everybody on my license. So these are all of the people that can receive this file for review. So I'm going to send it to a couple people here. Justin's on the call with me. He's going to help out and help us review this file so we can see how this looks. I'm also going to send it to this subject matter expert. Tim is an SME on my license. So again, You don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert to review content in the cloud. You can send it to other Flare authors as well. As long as they're a user in your Central license, you can involve any of those folks in the review process. And then I'll click send. Now I already did that before the webinar just to save a couple seconds. So I sent it already, but what you would see is a message that says files are up on Central for review. Now, one thing to point out is everybody who's on that list, everybody who was selected there to receive that file for review, they're going to receive an email right away that says, you have files for review, click here. And what happens is when you click on that link, it's going to take you right into Central and right into the files for review. So I'm going to switch hats for a moment. Remember, I was here in Central, logged in as me. I'm going to actually log in as my subject matter expert here so we can see what the SME would experience, because what they see is slightly different than what we see here. Remember, they won't have access to all these functional areas, so it's a little bit different view. It's much more simplified. So I'm going to pretend for a moment that I'm Tim, and I'm going to log in as Tim because I just got that email that said, hey, you've got files for review. I've been summoned. I got to log in and check these things out. And so what I'm going to see is this. Oops, I opened in my other monitor. Let me drag him over. So I'm Tim now. Here's Tim up I logged in as Tim, name up on the upper right-hand side. Got my license here, so I'm successfully logged in. And what Tim sees is he's going to see this. He's going to see this home page with these big instructions that say, review topics here. Select a file from the left to get started. Now notice on the left-hand side, Tim doesn't have access to all of that other stuff. He won't get lost in anything. All he has access to is this review page here. And we'll notice we've got this basic steps topic here on the left. This is the file that I've been asked as Tim to review. So I'll select it. And the topic loads in our lightweight editor. So a couple things to point out in terms of what's going on here. So this is that same content. You'll notice we've got this really basic formatting toolbar up here. We can we can type content. We can make bulleted lists, we can make numbered lists, we can take this content and we can apply some heading styles to it. We've got a little pen here which we can use to add comments to the content. So this is where we're going to make our edits to this. So I can start typing in content as Tim. Now notice as I'm typing, all of my content's getting tracked here on the right-hand side. Maybe we need a little colon right here. So there he goes. Maybe this is a heading 2. So server configuration, maybe I think, well, this should be a heading 2. We can see all of those changes are tracked. And, you know, as Tim, I come in here as server configuration overview. I can leave a comment here if I want. Maybe I'll say something like, this is Justin's domain. So maybe this is something for Justin to fill out. So I click out of there. And remember, Justin received an email as well that he is supposed to receive files for review. So notice what's happening here. He logged into Central. He's typing in some information as we're looking at the same file. He's actually typing that right now, a system configuration and systems engineering defines. So he's typing this while we're looking at this file. We can both be in here doing things at the same time. So it supports this multi-review workflow. We don't have to save this file. As Tim, I don't have to save it and then daisy chain it around the group. We can both be in here at the same time. And of course, all of those changes are tracked. So we've added some content here. We've made some updates and we've made some edits. A couple things I can point out that may be interesting. Notice as I click around in here, we do get a little bit of tag information up here. So you know, in Flare, we've got those structure bars, and in Contributor, those structure bars are on. And, you know, there was some feedback that, you know, from a subject matter expert point of view, that was a little bit daunting. I mean, even though as authors, it's helpful to know what things are, the feedback was that for some folks, it was kind of scary. So I think this is really handy because when we click in here, we still see the tag information, but it's a lot more subtle. Your subject matter expert, you know, if they don't care, they probably won't notice that. But as you're clicking around, you know, you can see what you're in. Are you in a P tag? Here we're in a heading 1. You know, here we're in a heading 2, and you can actually see some information about the change. We can see there was an annotation created by somebody. There was some check changes. So we get a little bit of information about the tags, but it's a lot more subtle. And also over here, we don't have a bunch of lines. You know, if you've ever looked at a review document in Microsoft Word, it's sort of filled with all those lines. We don't show you those lines until you actually hover over the change or the comment, and then we kind of highlight where that is. So again, I think from a UI perspective, it's a little bit more subtle and more clean. Over here on the right-hand side, I want to point out a couple things. Here we can see who the author was of the file, and we can also see who the subject matter experts are. So who's supposed to be reviewing this thing. And we can also see, this is going to become important in a moment, the review status. So right now it's open, right? So here I am as Tim, my review status is open. I've made some edits to this file. As soon as we're done editing everything, and by the way, all of your content's being auto-saved as you type. You don't have to type and save anything. This lightweight editor, it's going to actually save everything as you go. Once I'm done making my edits though, I'm going to go ahead and click this green submit button. And so once I hit submit, well, then my review status is complete. And when Justin's done making his reviews, he's going to hit that submit button as well. So if I refresh my page, we see his is complete too. So at any point in time, you know, the author, the subject matter experts, we can see what the status is of this review file. Now, when the very last person hits submit, so when the last person on this SME list here, and again, they can be subject matter experts in Central, they can even be those Flare authors, but when the last person hits that submit button, the author who sent it, so me, gets an email that says reviews are complete. Click here to see them. So I get notified right away when that last person hits submit. And what will happen is when I click that view here button, I'm going to go back to Central. I'm going to take my Tim hat off and I'm going to put my Jennifer hat back on. And I'm going to show you what I would see if I were to click that link in the email that I received. So I'll come back here. I'm going to click on the reviews tab. So I don't have, you know, we see Tim, I should have pointed this out and I'll show you just a moment, but Tim only had pending, submitted, and archive. As an author, you actually have a sent item because these are files that you've sent for review from Flare because you're actually sending files from Flare. Reviewers can't send anything from Flare, or subject matter experts can't because they're just receiving files for review. But if you've got a full author seat in Flare, then you'll be able to see this extra sent tab here because you may be a Flare author sending files out. So when I click on that link in the email that I received, when it let me know that everybody hit that submit button and all reviews are done, I come right here to this file. And I can see the raw version of this file. I can see all of the raw edits here. I can even come in here and make additional edits if I want to. So I can come in here and say more content if I want, and you can see my changes are being tracked. So at any point in time, as long as that, you know, as long as that file hasn't been closed out, well then we can make edits here. We don't have to do it all back in Flare. Any changes that you make here in this editor are going to be tracked, even if you're the original author that sent it out. So I come in here, I can even make additional edits if I want. But now we want to resolve all of these changes. We've got some edits here from our SMEs. We need to make this part of our new single source of truth and incorporate these changes back into our main source files. And that's actually done back in Flare. So remember, we started in Flare, we sent it out, we did our reviews here. Now it's time to come back into Flare and resolve all of those changes. So back to Flare we go. And I'm going to actually pull up my file reviews here. And I'm going to bring in, if you notice, right when I clicked File Reviews, again, it's in the Review tab. Sometimes it's open. If it's not, just come to the Review tab here and click File Reviews. And we're looking at the inbox. What we're seeing here in your inbox are going to be all of the files that have been submitted from Central back to you for resolution here. So here we've got this topic, Basic Steps. Here's the one we sent out. It's in that submitted state. What we have to do is, even when the file's in the submitted state, because let's say, as a subject matter expert, let's say they hit that submit button. You know, Tim, for example, I'll go back to Tim's view. And he hit submit, and now that topic is in the submitted. It's not in pending anymore, it's in submitted. When a topic is still in this submitted state or this submitted tab, you know, if he forgot to make an edit, you can come back in here and add content if you want, okay? So you can do that. But as soon as we close out that topic in Flare, this is going to become a read-only file. Okay, so back to Flare I go. So once it's in that submitted, even if he forgot, that's okay. He can still go back and make some edits. But in Flare, I'm going to just do a quick refresh here. We have to close out that file. We have to cut the cord because at some point we may need to send Basic Steps out for review again, but closing it out prevents anybody from making any edits in that lightweight editor. So I'll double click it and Flare's going to prompt me to close it out. So before I can start resolving any of those changes, it's going to prompt me to close it. So I'll click OK. And we'll see here that the status of that file went from submitted to closed. And so now if I were Tim, I'll come back here and refresh. You see it's not in my pending, it's not in my submitted anymore, it's in my archive. So here's that basic steps. This is a read-only file. I can't come in here and edit anything, but when we log into Central, whether I'm an author or anybody who was on that list to receive files, anything that's been closed out in Flare is still accessible in this archive tab, but just in a read-only state, so just the raw edits. So back to Flare we go. Now I can come here and I can start accepting and rejecting changes, and I can do it one by one if I want. You know, I've got some stuff to do here. I can also use the buttons up here. I can accept all changes if I want to. So I'll accept all changes in the document. Now, annotations stay, and you can choose what you want to do with those annotations. You can, you know, maybe somebody just added some feedback for you in that little comment window, so you can do what you need to do with that comment. You can choose to delete it if you want, or you can keep it in there. If you find that you want to keep that annotation in for whatever reason and you just want to turn them off, you can also uncheck the Show Changes button here. That turns the annotation off. Doesn't delete it, it just turns it off from view. So your choice how you want to handle that, but I'll go ahead and keep him in. Now the last step here is just to accept the file. By accepting the file, what that does is it replaces the old basic steps with the new basic steps. So if I open him up here in Flare, all of my changes are now incorporated. So there's my more content. I added that. Remember, we added this even after we submitted the file. So now we can continue make our edits in Flare as an author and commit those changes to source control. So now that this is our new single source of truth for that basic steps topic. So again, we can send content out for review not only to subject matter experts, but also Flare authors. Now, a couple of benefits I want to review again. So let me switch back to PowerPoint. A lot of application switching today. Some of the big benefits, again, no need to install and download any kind of desktop software. All of the review and all the collaboration, all the edits, that's going to take place in the cloud. So that's a big plus. We have this ability to do multi-user editing now. Subject matter experts, Flare authors, they can make changes and add comments to the same topic or snippet at the same time. We don't need to save files and daisy chain them around the group if different contributors and collaborators want to see what everybody else is doing. We can all be in there at the same time. Multiple edits can be happening at the same time and everything's getting tracked. We have this review-only interface. So that lightweight version of the editor means it's much more streamlined for your subject matter expert. They are only going to see the options and the features that are relevant to the review process. Also, auto-save and tracking. Everything that is being auto-saved as you work. You don't have to go through the process of saving and naming any files. And in addition, as we saw, all of the changes and the edits that we make in the editor are automatically tracked so that the original author can see those edits for approval or rejection, you know, exception or rejection in the Flare interface. So kind of just an overview of the benefits there. A couple other mentions, if I go back to my, my browser for a minute, a couple other things in Central that you'll see. If I go to the Projects tab, I just want to point out a couple of views. In fact, I'm going to open up another project. This is actually the projects page. I didn't talk about this because we were focusing on the reviews, but this is just one other functional area in Central. This shows you a list of all of the projects that have been copied up to your Central license. So we can see this is that Flare project I was just working on, but I've got another one open here that I'll show you just to kind of point out two new things in the Central interface that you'll notice. When we load a project, when we come to the projects page and we actually open it like I've done here, there's two new buttons over here. There used to be only one here that said repository, but now we've got a button here that says files. And if we select files, this gives us, this is sort of a replication here of the Flare project. Here we've got our content explorer, this is the project organizer and the Flare project. But what this shows us, if I expand this out here, this is a different project, so it looks a little bit different than the basic steps topic that I was looking at. This gives us a read-only preview of the file. Previously, when this button only said repository, all we saw was this. We just saw the code view, and it wasn't such a big deal, but you know, if you're like me, that looks like, you know, Greek, and I much prefer a WYSIWYG or a visual view here. So we get this real life view of the content in this preview mode. You can't do anything to it, but at least you can see it from a preview standpoint. You don't have to, you know, look at the code view if you don't want. We've also got this history button here. And this shows us a nice stacked history of all of the commits of this file. So we can see this was initial one. I made a commit yesterday, and it shows you your comment. You know, if you're doing commits and you've got a process in place where you add a comment every time you commit your changes to your source control, it actually shows you here. And you can view the commit if you want. You can view the differences. So a side-by-side view or a top and bottom view of those differences, however you like to work, but you can see what's new and what's different from those different commits if you want. So that's you can see these things on a file by file basis if you want to. So a couple different ways to look at it. We've also got this commits button here. This shows us a commit. This shows us sort of on a project level the history of the commits. So the other one showed us file by file. This shows us everything that was going on in the project from a commit standpoint. So it sort of group everything together. And same thing, we can view the commits and see the differences of what's happening at the file and what changed. So two different views to look at, a little bit different than we had before. Again, it used to just say repository here, and we had this code view only. So now when we look at our files, if we wanted, we can look at a preview of them if we want to just see what they look like. So those are the three big things. So we've got the new review workflow in Central now. No need to install desktop tools, and then a couple other new honorable mentions here in terms of how we're viewing our project files in Central. So I think I got everything. I hope you guys have some questions coming in. I see some. Let's go ahead, and before we get to them, I just have a couple things I'd like to remind everybody on. We'll go back to PowerPoint. Mad World's coming up. I hope you're not sick of me saying this, but we're really excited about it. And if you haven't seen the information, we've got a lot of information on our website, but we have two conferences coming up. If one wasn't enough in San Diego, we decided to do one in Europe this year, which is really exciting. So we've got San Diego coming up June 3rd through the 6th at the beautiful Hotel Del. We've got, for both of these sessions, we've got an amazing panel of speakers lined up, great venues, as you can see. We have, the sessions are chocked full of learning opportunity. They're tips and tricks that you can take back to your work and start using right away. Plus, with both of these sessions, we've got our hospitality lounge open, and the hospitality lounge, many say, is worth the price of admission. We staff it with members of tech support and R&D, so you can come with your project-specific questions, workflow questions, best practices questions, and you get that one-on-one or over-the-shoulder help. We'll have workstations set up, or you can bring your own laptop with your project, or bring your project on a thumb drive. We'll load it up and take a look at it with you. So those are available with both conferences as well. And then in Prague, we'll be there September 11th through the 14th. So registration information, schedule, speakers, all up on that website there. So hopefully you can join us for that if you haven't already signed up. I also want to make mention of a quick introductory promotion for Flare and Central. We have a promotion where you get a 12-month subscription of Flare. That includes also a 12-month MadCap Central author seat and a 12-month subject matter expert seat. So a subscription of Flare and also a subscription of Central, both for all for 12 months. It all includes platinum level maintenance, so you have all upgrades and updates free. You have full access to our tech support team by phone and email, and you save over $200 per license on this bundle, so it's only $19.99. If you have any questions about it, contact your sales rep. Contact us at sales@madcapsoftware.com and we'll be sure and help you out. So again, if you don't yet have a subscription of Central, you can sign up for a trial right on our website. In order to take advantage of the review workflow, you will need to have Flare 2018. And again, if you don't have that, well, then you can use that on a trial basis too. But you'll need a minimum of Flare 2018 to send files out for review with Central, and you're going to want to have that Central license. So try it out, give it a go. Actually, when you're trying it out, you have unlimited authors and subject matter experts that you can invite on a trial basis. So it's a good way to test it in your environment and let us know how it goes and any kind of questions that you have. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put my email up here, see what kinds of questions we have. Let me pull this out so I can see. Okay, so we have some questions coming in. Keep asking them. And let me make this bigger so I can see them here. And so the question is, here's a great question. Can I assume an author must be a licensed Flare user? Great question. Not necessarily. The author seat in Central gives you access to all of the functional areas in Central. So generally a Flare author will have a full author seat in Central, because Flare authors, particularly if you're using Central for source control and the review, Flare authors are going to want to sync their projects to Central from a source control standpoint, and they're also going to want to send files for review. So generally, yes, Flare authors do have a full author seat in Central, but sometimes non-Flare authors may have a full author seat as well. If you have somebody else on your team, maybe a manager or somebody in QA, they're not a Flare author, but they may want a full author seat in Central if they need to have access to all of the functional areas in Central. Like maybe you're using Central to stage your builds, and you want to build some of your targets and have them privately staged there, and have another person who's not a Flare author view your builds and check out how does everything look in its entirety. Like, what does the final HTML5 look like, or what does my PDF look like? You can build everything in Central. Non-Flare users that are authors in Central, they can actually view your builds. You can assign them tasks to say, hey, QA engineer, here's a link to my output file that's the private output file that's staged on Central. Check it out, let me know what you think. So they don't necessarily have to be Flare authors, but you'll want to think about how much do they want to do in Central. If they may need access to more of the functional areas in Central, then they're going to want to be a quote author in Central, but they don't necessarily have to be a Flare author. So long answer to your short question. I hope that helps, and certainly I can clarify. Can I bind a project to MadCap Central and to another source control system like Team Foundation Server? Great question, and the answer is yes. We would call that a dual bound model, which means that your primary source control activities, when you're using Flare, you're checking in, you're checking out, that's all going to be done in TFS. Central is going to act as a secondary repository, so you'll be syncing, you'll just do syncs to Central. You're not using it as your source control tool. All of that's done with TFS, all the conflict resolution, all that's done there. But you're going to want to do periodic syncs to Central so that you can use the review workflow. Central has to see your most up-to-date version of the project. And in fact, it will actually prompt you. If you're checking in and checking out a TFS, if it comes time to send a topic for review, you're going to get a little prompt from Central because it's going to be bound to Central as well. Central's going to say, hey, you need to sync with me first before you can send that out for review. So even if you forget, it's still going to prompt you. But absolutely, you can have your primary source control tool be whatever you want and have Central be a secondary repository so that it can see the Flare content for review and all the other fun things that Central can do. So great question. So can I add tables or images with this tool? So great question. Unfortunately, not at this time. Something that we're looking at and researching, you can't add images. Now, images and tables, I didn't have one in my example. Images and tables will be rendered in the topic, but we just can't edit them yet. Hopefully that changes. But at this time, we can't edit those tables. You could always add a comment around them and give feedback on them, but right now they're not editable. But great feature suggestion. Hopefully we can support that soon. Okay, so I'm trying to find questions where we got multiple people asking the same thing. That's probably a good thing. How do you handle conflicts, collisions, when two or more users are editing the same content at the same time? Well, so there's two kinds of things where we can collide. We can collide in the actual Flare source topics, right? As two Flare authors, if you've got multiple people working on the same topic at the same time in Flare, well, that's where source control is great, right? Because if you try to commit or check in your changes to source control, it's going to help you manage those conflicts and prevent you from stepping on people's toes. It's going to know that, hey, you're not working on the most up-to-date version of this file. Do you want to take a look at the conflicts and manage those things? So from a source topic standpoint, your source control solution, whether it's Central or TFS or whatever, it's going to help you with that. But when we're talking about the lightweight editor and two people being in the same file at the same time, well, that's one of the things it was designed to do. But Central is going to track all of those changes. The lightweight editor is going to track all of those changes to the content when multiple users are editing, so that when we bring that file back into Flare, you're going to be able to accept and reject any of those changes that your reviewers or your collaborators made. So what if conflicts are detected? Is there a merge, compare, discard kind of thing? So again, if we're talking about the source topics, yes, your source control solution, again, if it's Central or TFS, that's going to help you manage the merging or the comparing of the source content files. But if we're talking about just the review stamp or just the review view in that lightweight editor, those changes are going to be made concurrently within the central editor. So again, all of that's going to be resolved when we bring that file back into Flare. So every line that gets added in that central editor, it's going to be tracked. So you'll be able to manage those just from the review standpoint there. But from the Flare author side of things, if you're working in Flare and you've got multiple authors in the same topic, when you're checking in or syncing your project to your source control solution, no matter what it is, that's going to help you resolve the conflicts in those source files. So, okay, here's a question. I don't want my author's review to be seen by the SME. Do I have to send 2 different reviews, select the file 2 different times? So that's an interesting question. Let me think about that. So let's see, if you don't want the authors to edit at the same time as the subject matter experts, probably best to send the review at different times. So include them differently, so you may want to, incorporate some of those changes, maybe send it back out again. So yeah, you can start, I only sent that review out once, but if that basic steps topic needs to go out again or go to a different set of people, I can start that review process again. Are the Flare files stored in the cloud, on the author's computer, or both? So they're actually going to be stored in both places if we're talking about Central. So you're working on a local copy of your Flare projects, but you've made a copy of your project in Central so that Central can see it. And so it's actually being copied and it's stored in MadCap Central, which is in the cloud. So it's actually in both places. Is there a check-in and check-out for the repository similar to Subversion? Can 2 authors work on the same file? Yes, so Central actually works on a customized version of Git. So if we're using Central as our primary source control solution, you're going to be working on your local Flare projects. Central uses the same terminology of Git, so it's the committing and the pushing and the pulling instead of check-in, check-out like Team Foundation Server. So if you're working in Flare or multiple authors are working in the Flare project, you're going to be pushing and pulling your changes to Central. That way you can have multiple authors working on the same Flare project at the same time, and Central is going to be that primary source control tool. It's going to help manage all those conflicts and everything and act as your source control repository. If I have one Central license, how many contributors can I invite to do reviews? Oh, great question. I haven't talked about that yet, so thank you for asking. So you can invite as many people to your Central license that you've purchased licenses for. So authors, the full author seat in Central, that's $79 per user per month. And you can purchase that within the Central app. If you've signed up for a trial, you can turn that trial into a full license and add however many author seats you want. It's $79 per user per month. A subject matter expert seat, so the folks that you want to invite to the license to just do reviews, that's $10 per user per month. And again, you can do it on a month-to-month basis if you want. If you already have a Central license, contact your rep because we can work with you and make sure that we get you, the right kind of license for your needs. But the full author seat in Central, $79 per user per month. Subject matter experts, $10 per user per month. So if you had, for as many seats as you have, you can invite people. And by the way, people can change. If you've got seats available, you can invite different users. If you have a subject matter expert that you don't need on your license anymore, you can deactivate that person and invite somebody else. It just frees up a seat for you to bring somebody else onto the license. So you can move these people around. As long as you've got a seat to pass out, there's no charge to move somebody off and bring somebody else back on. And you can manage this all within the Central application yourself. Okay. So kind of piggybacking onto that question, here's one. Are seats floating licenses or fixed to a single user? So at this time, central seats are assigned to a user, but it's really easy to move people around if you need to. So again, if you had a number of authors and subject matter experts, if you that user admin in your central license, well, then you have the ability and the power to uninvite or deactivate people and activate other folks. So you can manage that really easily, and so there's no charge to move people around or exchange seats around, as long as you've got that seat available to pass out. And again, you may need to free one up if you don't want to purchase another one, but if somebody moves off the project and you want to move somebody back on, it's really easy to do in Central. Okay, let's see. So how do you guarantee the privacy of content stored in the cloud? What kind of security is used? That's a great question. So MadCap Central, from a security standpoint, this isn't actually a server that we're storing in our server room here at headquarters and at MadCap. We actually built MadCap Central on Microsoft Azure, and we partnered with them because of their strict security policies and all of their procedures. So this is a managed service built on and stored on Azure. So it's done through a very secure managed data center via Microsoft. And we actually have a pretty detailed security white paper that we can send out to everybody if there's interest. And we'll send it out as part of the recording, and the questions, not a problem, but we've outlined the whole security aspect of it there. But rest assured, nothing's sitting in a closet in our headquarters. This is a managed service through Microsoft Azure. Does build management support merged projects? So I think if you mean like global project linking, hopefully that's what you mean. The answer is yes. So if you've got a global project linking setup where you've got a parent project and then these child projects that are linked, all of those can be bound to Central, and you can build everything in Central even if you've got global project linking set up. So yes, that is supported. Okay, so looking for a few more. We got a few more questions coming in. So here's a question. Is your content structure data-based, docbook, custom? So Flare project files are just made up of flat XML files. The topic files themselves validate against the XHTML schema from the W3C. So we don't validate against DITA so much, or at all. We can actually import DITA files and we can export to DITA, but our topic files themselves are XHTML based. So it offered we chose that route for a number of reasons. So with Flare topics, we still offer some of that document structure that you would expect without some of the rigidity of DITA or DocBook. So wait for a couple more questions to come in. I'm just going to do a quick check on time. We've got a couple minutes. One more question here I think we can take. So can subject matter experts trigger the review workflow from Central? That's a great question. Not at this time. At this time, the whole process starts from the Flare authors on the Flare side of things, but that's I can see some great potential there with that. So that's a great suggestion. We'll make sure to get that added. But that is an interesting question. I can visualize some interesting things with that process. Here's an interesting question that just came in. I have all projects on Subversion. Can I bulk upload to Central? So if you want to cut the cord from Subversion and you don't want to use that as your primary source control tool, if you have a Central subscription, then yes, you can, with 2 clicks of a button, you can take your Flare project that's not in Subversion anymore, and you can bind it to Central as your primary source control tool. So yes, when you copy your project to Central, it just takes usually less than a minute or so, but you're basically copying your entire project up to Central. You can also choose, as I mentioned before, you can still have Subversion as your primary source control tool and do a second sync to Central so that you can take advantage of all of the things that Central has to offer like the task management, the reviews, build management, and all that fun stuff. So you can have it single or you can have both. And we actually have some great documentation in the help files that talk about both the single bound model, which is just central as your source control option, and also what we call the dual bound model, which is when you have a different source control solution like Subversion or TFS as that primary one, and then central as a secondary repository. Great. Well, I think we're kind of at the end here. I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to leave this question panel up for just a moment in case any other questions funnel in. My email address is up on the screen, so feel free to jot it down. If you think of anything after the fact that you didn't get a chance to ask, please drop me a line and let me know. Would love to get your feedback, good, bad, or ugly. Let us know what you thought of the webinar. Let us know what you think as you test this out. If you have any questions about setting up a test license, or any specific questions, we'd be happy to help you directly. Drop me a line. I want to thank everybody for coming today and for taking the time with me. And we hope to see you on the next webinar, and we hope to see you at one of the conferences. So take care, have a wonderful rest of the week, and see you on the next session.